Hi, how are you? It's me. Hi, we're talking about, we're doing a story time video, is what we're doing. I don't got my headphones on, so I can't hear my voice in my head. I'm not loud enough for me. Anyways, we, uh, I've got kind of a treat for you. I was approached, in between, I guess, fall of last year and January of this year with a lot of new clients to me, a lot of clients that I don't think I've worked for before. Now, there's a question on that. I actually have a client with a very similar name to EM Lindsey. And by the way, that's who this is. EM Lindsey in my archives. It's a very close name. I could ask her if I did this book years ago called Gingerbread Palace. But anyways, new client, I believe to me, EM Lindsey approached me, and occasionally I get a treat. Occasionally, I mean, I love my clients, and I'm privileged at this point in my career. I get to work for a lot of really good authors. It's amazing the talent that's out there, really. But this one in particular, it just the style, the quality took me by surprise. I was really impressed. So I'm not telling you about anybody new here. Everybody knows who EM Lindsey is, but now I know, and I've sunk my hooks into her. I didn't don't 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 tell her about the pissing on her leg thing. I haven't told her that yet. Shh, don't tell her about that. Anyways, this is a new series that we're working on for EM Lindsey, and we're actually going to be doing some more projects for her in the very near future as well. But this one is called Switch Hitter. It's Hit and Run Book One. I'm incredibly excited about this, and this offers a couple things that I don't normally do. First off, well, let's do for first and last. French. Fucking French. We had a lot of French in this book. Now, y'all know my fondness for the French language, but I took on this, and we knocked it out of the park. By the way, thank you to Jody and Tracy and everyone in the crowd, too. Emma was in there helping us. A few people, Cheryl, that speaks French. Everyone and the Brigadiers that really helped us out in here. And, of course, Jody and Tracy is our working for Falcon Sound and really just knocking out of the park with the pre-production and making me look like I know what I'm doing when I really don't. Now, I'm going to read you the blurb here. Get a personal chef, they said. It'll be fun, they said. And then Thierry shows up, and Pietro realizes his mistake because he knows Thierry a little too well. Thierry is a man who told his ex to leave him. Thierry is a man who punched Pietro and ran. Thierry is his ex-boyfriend's best friend. But Pietro also knows the man needs a job. An injury destroyed his former career, and Pietro is nothing if not a bleeding heart. Besides, he doesn't have time to search for a new chef, not with the World Series looming and his team ready to go all the way. Life gets complicated, though, when he and Thierry cross a line one night after a lot of wine and several bad jokes. And while hooking up is one thing, Pietro knows the last thing in the world he needs is for his heart to get involved. Too bad it tends to make decisions without him. Now, two main characters, of course, as there typically is. One is Thierry, and Thierry is an ex-bodyguard who is turned out he got injured, and now he is a chef. Thierry. It's kind of hard to spell. Then Pietro is a baseball player. He's a very good team, and they're about to play in the World Series, pretty close to it. We're coming in kind of about a third of the way through the book in chapter 11. I thought this was a very good representation. I'm not going to give any, it doesn't give any spoilers or anything like that, but it's a good representation of the two of them in a scene together. So I hope you enjoy it. Check it out, and please, by all means, it's already, I'm recording this on April 15th of 2022. It actually came out like yesterday, so it's already out. It beat me to the punch here, so grab it, enjoy. It's on Audible. I think this is credit worthy, by all means. Love y'all. 8. Pietro told himself to keep away, but half an hour into the game he was losing badly. He was drawn by the smell. It gave him a sudden burst of nostalgia. Maybe not exactly like his childhood, but it lacked the acrid scent of to-go boxes from even the most high-end dining places. And knowing that there wasn't a microwave in use was enough for him to tiptoe down the hall and peer around the kitchen wall. Terry was seated at the stove on a bar stool rather than his walker, which he was holding off to the side for balance. His other arm was occupied by constant stirring, and it was only the slightest twitch in his elbow that told Pietro he'd given himself away. There it is. I fascinate you. Metafixe. Why'd you go away? Oh, wait. No, hang on. I just got the match thing. I don't know how I did it. How did I fucking do that? Let's do this again. How did I get the match thing? Ah. That's exactly what I fucking need. Find on page. Look at that. Fucking A.
All this techie wizardry bullshit you know, and you don't know Control F.
Well, in conjunction with the search box, no. I definitely know Control F, but that's a different thing. So once you search in OneNote with a little box on the right, if you hit find on page, then it will give you an up-down arrow so you can scroll through, because like you put in ME, it's going to find a fucking 1,000 of those.
Right?
But this allows me to do it, do a find on page with that inside of OneNote and then inside the page that I want. It's a beautiful thing. It's not a very complicated function, but it helps tremendously. I was struggling with that, looking for some of these words.
Metafixe.
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 All right. And it was only the slightest twitch in his elbow that told Pietro he'd given himself away. Metafixe? Thierry asked after a beat, and Pietro didn't know that phrase, but he could infer he had been caught staring. You might as well come in. Pietro sighed and put his hands behind his back like a scolded child. Sorry, it just smells amazing. Glancing over his shoulder, Thierry rolled his eyes, but his cheeks were flushed and his mouth was turned up in the corners. I perfected this recipe years ago. Risotto, he clarified. Pietro couldn't help his groan. It was one of his most favorite things, and his mouth began to water in earnest as he saw a bowl of bacon, mushrooms, and green onions all cooked and sitting off to the side. There was a bottle of white wine uncorked, perched near Thierry's elbow, and Pietro's hand darted out to grab it. By the end of this book, I'll know how to do this. What is it?
Putain.
Thank you. Perched near Thierry's elbow, and Pietro's hand darted out to grab it. Ah, putain. Are you trying to ruin the dinner? Thierry demanded, letting go of the walker so he could give Pietro a shove. I want to do that one more time. Perched near Thierry's elbow, and Pietro's hand darted out to grab it. Ah, putain? Putain. Putain. Is that more like a putain?
Yes.
All right. Perched near Thierry's elbow, and Pietro's hand darted out to grab it. Putain? Are you trying to ruin the dinner? Thierry demanded, letting go of the walker so he could give Pietro a shove away. Pietro laughed as he stumbled, catching the counter as he brought the bottle to his lips and... Thierry demanded, letting go of the walker so he could give Pietro a shove away. Pietro laughed as he stumbled, catching the counter as he brought the bottle. Thierry demanded, letting go of the walker so he could give Pietro a shove away. Pietro laughed as he stumbled, catching the counter as he brought the bottle to his lips and took a small drink. How could I possibly ruin the food? It's already perfect. Thierry scoffed quietly as he reached for a small ladle and added something from a simmering saucepot. If anyone could do it, you could. Pietro took another sip of the wine, then set it on the counter and used his hands to heave himself up. You're not helping, stomach. Wine, then set it on the counter and used his hands to heave himself up. He perched on the edge and gently swung his legs from side to side, listening to the heavy thud as his walking boot caught on the edge of the cabinet door. He ignored Thierry's tisk, grinning at the man. Is it hate or habit? Thierry looked at him, his face a mess of himself. Grinning at the man. Is it hate or habit? Thierry looked at him, his face a mask of confusion. I don't understand. Do you hate me still? Or is it just habit to insult me? At that, Thierry looked away, but Pietro was sure he caught guilt on his face. I never hated you. I didn't understand your relationship with Hervé, but it wasn't hate. And yet you thought it was a good idea to make sure we split up. I mean, even if you thought I was a massive piece of shit like him, wouldn't that have been a good thing? The words burned a little as he said them, but Pietro couldn't seem to stop himself. Keeping him off the market and away from all the good men who don't deserve them. Thierry gave the risotto one more stir, then dropped the spoon and turned it off, before swiveling to face him. Pietro's heart began to thud in his chest, because he knew he had at least approached the line between them, if he hadn't crossed it already. He had at least approached the line between them, if he hadn't crossed it already. I don't think this is a good match. Wait, I love cooking, and I'm eager to get my life started again. But if we can move past what was... I love cooking, and I'm eager to get my life started again. But if we can't move past what was... Pietro held up both of his hands. Come on, dude. What was... Pietro held up both of his hands. Okay, I'm being a dick. I get that. You apologized, and that's fine. But it doesn't erase that you punched me in the face. With your fist. Terry's eyes widened. Would you have preferred I use something else? Like my knee?
You would have preferred.
With your fist. Terry's eyes widened. You would have preferred I use something else? Like my knee? Fuck's sake, dude, Pietro said. He hopped down as Thierry pulled himself up off the stool and gripped the handles of the walker like he was using it to help his balance. I saw the italics and I was like, another French word? Off the stool and gripped the handles of the walker like he was using it to help his balance. Yeah, off the stool and gripped the handles of the walker like he was using it to help his balance. I had to get off the stool and gripped the handles of the walker like he was using it to help his balance. I had to get veneers. Yes, the tragedy of a man so rich he can afford to get whatever work done he needs. Like he was using it to help his balance. I had to get veneers. Like he was using it to help his balance. I had to get veneers. Yes, the tragedy of a man so rich he can afford to get whatever work done he needs. Thierry sneered, the sound of his voice telling Pietro he had touched a nerve. I wouldn't have needed it if you hadn't punched me in the face, Pietro stressed. As I said, Thierry murmured quietly. We can't work like this if neither of us can move on. He started to move away, but
Stop.
Pietro...
If neither one of us can move on.
As I said, Thierry murmured quietly. We can't work like this if neither one of us can move on. He started to move away, but Pietro caught him by the sleeve and held tight. Their gazes locked for a long moment, and Pietro swore he could cut the tension between them with a knife. I guess you were kind of right. I wasn't a great boyfriend, he finally said. Thierry swallowed thickly. You weren't like him. No, but I was definitely an asshole at the best of times. Pietro let out a small laugh, because he hadn't admitted this out loud to anyone before, not even his therapist. I felt justified because Hervé wasn't a nice guy either. Like, I told myself it was okay to be a shitty boyfriend because he was someone who deserved it. I was in a bad place, and I just wanted someone to hurt as badly as I was hurting. And that... He blew out a puff of air and slowly removed his hand from Thierry's sleeve. That means I probably did earn a little bit of what you dished out. Maybe he didn't deserve to get clocked in the face by Hervé's hired guy, but he couldn't exactly stand as the moral poster child of good relationships. He and Hervé had been toxic, and he was done trying to pretend he was totally innocent. Sick. And he was done trying to pretend he was totally innocent. How do we move on? Pietro asked. Terry took a breath and carefully turned back to the stove. Pietro tried not to stare at his shuffling steps, instead fixing his gaze on the back of the man's head as he tipped the bowl of mushrooms, bacon, and onions back into the cooked rice. He added a handful of cheese after, stirring for so long Pietro wondered if that was it. The conversation was just over. Then Terry looked over his shoulder again. If you'd like to get bowls. Over. Then Terry looked over his shoulder again. If you'd like to get bowls, I forgot to grab them when I was sitting everything out. Pietro leapt at the chance for something to do, and he pulled his cheapest, ugliest bamboo bowls from the cupboard. You're having some too, right? Normally I'd say no, Terry said. But we should probably talk this out. So, if you don't mind... Fuck no, it makes me feel way less of a giant loser if you eat with me, Pietro told him. He pushed them close to the edge of the stove, then waited for Terry to fill them up. As he was pulling sprigs of parsley from a bushel as a garnish, Pietro stepped back. We can, eat at the table? Terry said nothing, but he offered a terse nod. So Pietro grabbed the bowls. As he took a step to the side, his boot caught on the edge of Terry's walker, and he almost hit the ground face first. Shit. Oops, no, that's... edge of Terry's walker, and he almost hit the ground face first. Shit, he gasped as he barely managed to catch himself and save the dinner. Terry covered a laugh with his hand. Do you need some help? Glowering, Pietro righted himself and marched toward the table to set the food down. Laugh all you want. I'm as fucking graceful as a gazelle out there on the field, and that's the only time it matters. If you say so, Terry said with a small smirk. Pietro grabbed forks, and Terry joined him a second later with a bottle of white wine and 2 glasses tucked in between his fingers. So, we can be a bit more civilized than drinking right from the bottle. Don't knock it. Bottles of wine remind me of my college glory days, Pietro told him, giving each glass a generous pour as Terry got settled. He took a drink, then eased back into his seat and stared at the food. If I cry, promise you won't judge me? Only if they are happy tears, Terry said. There was tension in his voice, and Pietro realized he was nervous. To end the anticipation, he shoved his fork into the cheesy rice and scooped a massive bite into his mouth. It was hot, but it was perfectly cooked, and his eyes really did water, entirely from happiness. Oh, real food.
Stop entirely with happiness.
Got it, yeah. Shoved his massive bite into his mouth. It was hot, but it was perfectly cooked, and his eyes really did water, entirely with happiness. Oh, real food, he groaned. Terry shook his head, but he was grinning. Is that all you need to be satisfied? Pietro rolled his eyes and grinned. You want compliments? Fine. This is the best risotto I have ever eaten. It's so good, I'd actually tell my aunt that and risk being disowned by my entire family. Terry burst into a small laugh and shook his head before taking his own bite. He smiled around his fork and nodded. I think it was a very good effort on my part. So, can I offer you the job now? Pietro asked. At that, Terry sobered a little. Pietro watched his face move through several expressions, and he couldn't tell if any of them were good or bad. It was probably what made him such a fucking good bodyguard for all the years he'd worked for Hervé, but Pietro was starting to have doubts that it would work here, in his home.
I don't want you to resent me for the past,
Thierry finally said.
and it's clear it still bothers you.
Pietro sighed and leaned back, rubbing at his mouth with the tips of his fingers. It does. The whole situation with Hervé really fucked with my head. Hell, it went on for so long, you know? And I feel like I only have... With my head. Hell, it went on for so long, you know? They fucked with my head. Hell, it went on for so long, you know? And I feel like I only know... They fucked with my head. Hell, it went on for so long, you know? And I feel like I only know half this shit that he got up to. Knowing he was worse doesn't excuse my behavior, but...
I understand.
Thierry said quietly.
It is a trail of destruction wherever he goes. And now I know what it feels like to be on that end of it.
Thierry's gaze darted away, which told Pietro enough.
I don't want him to be the ghost that follows me around until I die.
Pietro hadn't expected him to say that. Has he tried to talk to you about what happened? Thierry shook his head, but there was something in his gaze that told Pietro he wasn't being entirely honest.
Whatever he has to say, it's not important anymore. I've moved on.
Pietro knew how those words, as honest as Thierry wanted them to be, probably tasted like a lie. He and Hervé had never really been in love, but he still felt wrecked as he watched the man walk away, knowing in his heart it would be for the last time. He couldn't imagine what Thierry was going through. It wasn't the same for you, though, Pietro finally said, then shoved another bite into his mouth and spoke thickly through cheesy rice. You two were like forever.
Not forever. But I gave up so much of my future for him. But I gave up not my future for him.
Thierry muttered.
Not forever. But I gave up so much of my future for him.
Thierry muttered.
The day I met him, I had just moved to France. I was 8. My parents, they'd been living and working in England for almost 10 years.
Pietro went completely still. Hervé rarely talked about his past, and
10 years.
Pietro went completely still. Hervé rarely talked about his past, and only when he was drunk, so that he was
10 years.
Pietro went completely still. Hervé rarely talked about his past, and only when he was drunk, so the details were always so muddled. From everything his ex had said, Pietro had assumed Thierry and Hervé had known each other since they were in diapers. Thierry looked like someone had cracked him in half with the cleaver.
He was miserable, constantly bullied, and I thought I was doing something good for him when I started protecting him. I thought maybe it would matter in the end.
Pietro blew out a long breath of air, then found the courage to ask, "You were in love with him?" Thierry looked up and gave a...
Were you in love with him?
long breath of air, then found the courage to ask, "Were you in love with him?" Thierry looked up and gave a breathy laugh through his nose.
Everyone assumes, but no, it was never like that. I saw who he was when the cameras weren't watching. He was too
Cruel, Pietro finished for him, because he was. Hervé wasn't just selfish. He delighted in holding the threat of pain over the people in his life. Pietro had fed that trauma for a while, because it let him forget that being still and quiet hurt just as much. But in the end, that hadn't been worth it.
I became cruel for a while, too. Thierry went on. It was impossible not to when it surrounded me at every turn. Being shot, I think.
Stop. It was impossible not to be.
I became cruel for a while, too. Thierry went on. It was impossible not to be when it surrounded me at every turn. Being shot, I think. He shook his head, then shrugged and laid his hands on the table. It saved me. There are days I want my life back. I want to walk without pain or falling over. I want to believe I'll run again or that I'll regain control over my weaknesses. But I also know that if things hadn't happened this way, it might have taken another decade, maybe longer, to realize I was drowning in Hervé's world. Yeah, I'm not going to second guess it. Maybe longer to realize I was drowning in Hervé's world. Pietro swallowed thickly, and as much as he didn't want to pity the guy, he couldn't help it. That wasn't just his injury, it was knowing how it felt to be swept up in Hervé's storm and held there without hope that he would ever set him free. For Pietro, that had taken getting punched in the face and his teeth knocked out, but he also hadn't served more than half his life under Hervé's thumb. "Is this what you want to do?" Pietro finally asked, waving his hand toward his kitchen. "Cook for people like me?" "I need a job," Thierry admitted. "I can't go work in a professional kitchen. No matter how many times I drag myself across the floor in my physical therapy, I'm never going to get my old body back. This isn't all I want, but it is a start." Pietro had heard that before, from a person he loved more than life itself. Those words had tripped past Gabriel's lips during one of their bigger fights, just after his brother accepted the job at the high school. Pietro was angry because he wanted Gabriel to keep fighting, to keep working, to keep believing that there was some miracle that would give him his life back, but he'd come to realize that was selfish, because he wanted it for him, so he could stop feeling so fucking guilty that he got everything. Would give him his life back, but he'd come to realize that was selfish, because he wanted it for him so he could stop feeling so fucking guilty that he got everything and Gabriel had been left with the next big... would give him his life back, but he'd come to realize that was selfish, because he wanted it for him so he could stop feeling so fucking guilty that he got everything and Gabriel had been left with the next best thing. Pietro's own blind spot had not been realizing the next best thing could also be the one thing that
had been not realizing.
He got everything and Gabriel had been left with the next best thing. Pietro's own blind spot had been not realizing the next best thing could also be the one thing that made his brother feel whole. And it was only now, after seeing him with Ezra, after seeing Gabriel smile again and laugh again, that he realized the truth. Gabriel didn't need his old life to be happy, and maybe Thierry didn't either. "The pay will be good," Pietro finally said. Thierry blinked at him in surprise. The pay? Working for me. I don't expect you to be here morning, noon, and night to cook. I was thinking maybe you could whip stuff up for my breakfasts and lunches so that I could eat up. Working for me. I don't expect you to be here morning, noon, and night to cook. I was thinking maybe you could whip stuff up for my breakfasts and lunches that I could eat up. Then maybe you could do dinners Monday through Friday. I can handle weekends. My nutritionist will be so fucking happy I'm eating normal food during the week. He'll definitely give me weekends off. Terry's lips twitched. I think I can make that work. Pietro looked at him a long moment. And, he went on when Terry's face started to fall, if you're happy, and I'm happy, I want to renegotiate outside of that employment service company. They don't need to be taking a percentage of your wages. Terry bit his lip. I don't know. If it doesn't work out down the road, I can't... He let out a frustrated growl. I don't remember the fucking phrase. Set the bridge on fire.
Burn the bridge? Pietro asked with a small grin.
Oh my God, and the find on this page stays on.
Ouais.
Ouais, yeah.
Burn the bridge? Pietro asked with a small grin. Terry rolled his eyes.
Ouais, burn the bridge. If we don't work out, if you decide you don't want to look at the man who hurt you the way I did, I need to be able to find another job. I can't go back home to live with my parents.
If I decide I can't stand your face, Pietro vowed, knowing damn sure that would never be a problem because he never had an issue with the man's face. I swear I won't terminate our agreement until you have something else lined up. I'll put that in writing and make sure my lawyer gets it all nice and legal so you don't get fucked. But I'm going to be firm on this, okay? I'm not paying a company for your services. Terry hesitated.
I need health benefits.
Done, Pietro said. Of course, he didn't know what that would take, but he had people who could figure it out. Insurance, vacation time, shit, Christmas bonuses, whatever you need. Terry licked his lips, then finally nodded. Before he could say anything else, the horrible bong sound of the doorbell Pietro desperately needed to change rippled through the room. They both jolted, and Pietro groaned. If that's fucking Scooter right now...
Sarah,
Terry said quietly. Right, Sarah. Pietro had all but forgotten about her. Pretty sweet, badass Sarah, who knew Terry like most people never would. Jealousy was not a good look for him, though. Not in this situation. He didn't want Terry anyway. He just felt connected, he supposed, to the man that was also ripped apart by Hervé. I'll get it. Then we can chat hours and shit before you go. Terry nodded and said nothing, as Pietro hobbled to the door on his awkward boot, wondering if he was making the right decision or the wrong one. I'm going to do that last bit. Tie it up. Nodded and said nothing, as Pietro hobbled to the door on his awkward boot, wondering if he was making the right decision or the wrong one. There. I'm having a lot of fun with this book.